much money they're begging for in the bailout. But it's a very serious Wikipedia entry. It's actually quite a good one and very long. But this Wikipedia entry, for some reason that I can't understand, completely fails to mention the time when Kermit was on a TV commercial. But this is the only thing that the Muppet community cares about. What they're interested in for Ford Motor Company is to say, look, here's something in the world. How does it in some way intersect with the Ford Motor Company? So it turns out Kermit was on a commercial for a hybrid. He has this famous song, "It's Not Easy Being Green." In the commercial, he discovers it actually is easy being green. You just have to buy a Ford hybrid. So this is the kind of thing that this community is working on. Now, what I think is really interesting about this is that very often when we're thinking about the new media and the old media, we're thinking simply in a very simple way about how does the new replace the old. So we think about, how does Wikipedia compete with Britannica? How do blogs compete with the editorial page of the newspaper? But I think what we see here is something entirely new going on. If you go to a bookstore, if you go to Amazon.com, and you look for books about the Muppets, you can see there are a lot of books that have been written about the Muppets. Some of them official, some of them unofficial. But there's never before existed an economic model that could sustain the production of this kind of work. There's no economic model that would have allowed us to pay anyone to create this article. There's just not enough money to be made out of it. Sometimes people say, well, why don't you think about paying the contributors? And I say, well, I would love to pay the contributors. This is on the for-profit site. We're supported by advertising, except the amount of money we'll make from this is in pennies in the next 10 years, because this is one very obscure page out of millions of pages that will be created. In fact, what we need to understand is that what's going on here is something new and different. We have come to think about culture in the last 100 years, which I would consider to be the broadcast century. We've come to think about culture as having two major components. We think about the commercial culture, pop culture, which includes some really fabulous and amazing things. It includes things like the Beatles. It includes things like the Star Wars movies or The Matrix, really fabulous and very interesting projects that are funded in a very commercial way, and we're really happy that happens. Of course, commercial culture also contains a lot of really kind of like blah stuff. It produced the Beatles, and it also produced Britney Spears. So I don't know if they're Britney Spears fans, but and then on the other hand, we also think about fine arts culture. And we normally think of fine arts culture as something that needs to be produced in a subsidized way. We either have the state funding the opera or wealthy patrons funding art museums and things like this. That's another part of culture, but we don't think of that as being fully sustainable by just the market alone. Well, what we're seeing today come about is a return to what I call folk culture. And it's, I think, becoming much more important after a century in which folk culture was really pushed to the margin by commercial culture and subsidized fine arts culture, where we have ordinary people coming together to create cultural artifacts in a way that's not motivated by money in any way. They aren't paid to do it. They aren't trying to do it commercially, and they aren't being subsidized to do it. They're doing it simply out of the love of culture, out of the love of ideas, out of the love of some aspect of the world that they want to write about, talk about, and play around with. So I think this is a really important thing to recognize about new media, is that it isn't just somehow a replacement for what's old. It's actually in many ways something entirely new and interesting. So the next thing I want to talk about is another project of mine that we're doing at Wikia, and this is our search engine project. So this is a project, it's a side project of the company. It's something we've been working on now for, pretty hard for about a year. We've got a team of people who are dedicated to this. And basically what we're trying to do is create a completely open source software, completely freely licensed search engine with certain principles of transparency and openness and community control. Right now, most aspects of the internet are run by open source software. They're very community oriented, they're open, and you can see how things are done. Except search engines. Search engines are very secretive. It's very much a black box. And this is one of the most important editorial functions in our society. When you go to Google and you type in Dominican Republic, they're going to give you back 10 results. And they're going to say, these are the 10 most important things that we think you should look at if you just searched on Dominican Republic. For a long time, the search engines have encouraged us to think of that as, oh, it's simply a computer algorithm or a program. It's completely objective. But in fact, it's an editorial statement about the world. It's telling us these are the 10 most important things. I think it's perfectly fine for Google to make editorial statements about the world. I just think we need to recognize it for what it is. It is an editorial statement about the world. And what I'm hoping to create is a new system for doing this where it's completely transparent. Why are things ranked the way they are? What if the public thinks that something is ranked incorrectly? Can we have a system with neutrality, discussion, debate to actually change the order of the search engine? So this is what I'm working on at Wikia Search, and well, so far so good. I think it's going to be about another year before we're really competitive with the major search engines. Because of this, I've gotten a ridiculous amount of press coverage. This is the cover of Fast Company magazine in the US. It says there that I'm Google's worst nightmare with this really cool, scary picture. Well, I don't think it's true. I don't think I'm Google's worst nightmare, but my mother bought 10 copies of the magazine, so I guess it's okay. So this is what it looks like today. Basically, it looks like any other search engine. You can type in whatever. You can get weather results. But what's interesting is when you zoom in, we have these links here. You can edit, you can annotate, you can spotlight, comment, delete. So everything that you see in the search engine, you can edit live, and it works very much like a wiki. You can change anything. If you see a link that is irrelevant, you can delete it. Of course, if you try to delete something that really should be there, someone else can come along and undelete it and make it available again, and then you can have a discussion and debate about really what would be the quality results to have there. So I'm pretty excited about the project. It's something that's ongoing. Right now, we have a small community there. They've made, I think, about 2.5 million different edits so far of various kinds. So it's doing well. So how it's different, it's all open source software, all freely licensed content. We have all open APIs, which means ways that you can interact with the data. We publish all those and make sure that they're stable. And users control the search results. You can add things, edit things, move things around, delete things, and all that. So I want to close now with just a little bit of a discussion of the philosophy behind my work. And one of the ideas that I think is really important for us to think about in the internet age and moving forward. So one of the interesting things about the internet is that it is a social space. And I consider my work to be mostly about what I call community design, or the design of social spaces for people to interact. And as an exercise to help people think about things in a new way, what I always ask people to do is to imagine that you've been asked to design a restaurant. So you're going to design a restaurant completely from scratch. You can do anything that you want, and I want you to think outside the box, if we want to use a famous cliche, and be very original about how you're going to do it. And so if you think about what you're going to do, and you think about your restaurant, and you think, well, gee, in my restaurant, I'm going to be serving steak.